What's up, guys? 0-2 yesterday. Definitely hard to take when it looked like at least it was going to be a sure 1-1 with the Kings having a huge lead in their game. But you could argue that both of those plays last night should have gotten there and should have covered. You had North Carolina State. I mean, it looks really bad. They were losing the whole game. They wound up somehow overcoming a big deficit and winning the game after they were losing the entire way. They did win, so both of my plays won outright yesterday and failed to cover, so missed by like a few points. It was like 0-2 by a total of like 5 points, 6 points. You look at the statistics here, you can break down like the box scores here. NC State had like 20 more field goal attempts than Notre Dame did and the same amount of makes. Notre Dame just happened to have more than double their amount of three-pointers. NC State had more rebounds by 5, more free throw attempts, way fewer turnovers. So it's like they didn't even get outplayed in the game. They outplayed Notre Dame, and yeah, they won outright, but I think they should have covered based on that. When you have that many more scoring opportunities, shot attempts, and you wind up only shooting 28.8% from the floor and 17.6% from three, that's just absolutely ridiculous. And Notre Dame was 36.8% from three and 40.4% from the field. So we're just getting totally screwed by field goal percentage, basically. And that was the case in the Sacramento Kings game, too. The Sacramento Kings had a big lead pretty late in the game, like pretty deep into the third. They were up double digits, and they completely stalled out after they were up, 15, 13, who knows what it was. Led Orlando, excuse me. I think I gave it out at 5.5. I actually meant 5. I was actually on 5 last night. But yeah, then it wound up getting deep into the game, and it looked like the Kings, they got back ahead by 3, and it looked like, they might be able to still cover this on intentional fouls or whatever. Then the same thing happened again in overtime, I believe. And then I guess it went into double overtime as well. The same thing happened both times. I think in regular overtime and in double overtime, I think it looked like, they might be able to somehow cover this on intentional fouls. No, that didn't happen, and they wound up winning by 3 and missing the cover. And again, you look at the box score of this game, similar to the NC State one. It's just like deja vu, man. Sacramento Kings had 15 more field goal attempts, and they actually had 7 more makes than Orlando did. But from three-point range, Orlando had 10 more threes, and they were 25 of 44 from downtown, 56.8%. For a lot of the game, they were at like 60% from three-point range. That was the entire difference in the game, man. Sacramento had 15 more shot attempts. They had more makes as well. They had more free throw attempts and only 1 fewer free throw make. They had about 20 more rebounds, 19 more rebounds, more assists, fewer turnovers by a decent amount, it actually wound up not being as much as it was earlier in the game, but still fewer turnovers as well. It's like, how do you not cover this when you dominate a game like this statistically? And NC State, statistically, they kind of dominated the box score. Sacramento, even more so, they did. And they blew like a huge lead in this game. I don't know how that even happens. It's just disgusting, man. How you wind up losing because Orlando has like a complete outlier 3-point shooting night, 25 for 44. That was like the whole difference in the game, really. And Sacramento had like 40 more points in the paint than the Magic did as well, which is kind of what you like to see when you have a team that kind of tells you that a particular team is like dominating that game. So whatever. We move on to today. I think both of those plays should have won. I'm pissed. I have 3 plays today as it stands right now. I'm trying to be selective again. NBA, there are only 2 games, not playing either of them. Denver and Golden State should at least be like an interesting game, at least, I guess, a good game. Nuggets up from 2.5 to 3 is a road favorite, but 72% of the tickets and 70% of the cash on them. We'll see what happens in that game. It should be interesting, at least. College basketball, I have 1 play, and there are a couple of plays that I was potentially looking at. I think Stonehill is in like a definite fade spot, but I just don't want to lay points on the road with a team that's obviously the better team against one of the worst teams in college basketball, which is what Stonehill is. They haven't been up in Division I for that long. They're over in Massachusetts, Stonehill, local boys. Stonehill what did they just do? They just played 2 games on the road, and they got blown out at Miami, but then they played a really close game against Rutgers, and Rutgers does have a tendency to slow the pace way down and play close games, but Stonehill was in that game, man, and they only lost by 1. They were losing like earlier throughout the game, like basically by double digits, came all the way back and took the lead later in the game and fell just short by 1 point as 26.5-point underdogs. So I think that puts Stonehill in a bad spot. I don't know how you like bounce back after that. Really, you might have like that hangover spot. However, this is going to be their conference home opener against Central Connecticut State. Central Connecticut State, a team that usually is not very good, but this year I think they're a little bit better than in some previous years. And Central Connecticut State's coming off just beating some like D2 cupcake or something, so they are in the much better spot here. The only issue I have with it is that I think we're looking at laying way too many points at this point. Central Connecticut State up from 5 to 6 on the road. I think KenPom has this game around 5. I still don't see how Stonehill really gets back up off the mat after such a ridiculous performance, almost winning as a massive underdog against Rutgers. I still think that puts them in a bad spot, but the fact that it is their conference home opener, and I don't love the idea of like laying points on the road and giving up like a point of value to what KenPom says. I can't quite get there with that, so I'll just stay away. But Stonehill definitely in a terrible spot. And then the other team that's in a bad spot is Lipscomb. They are actually, this game is a pick'em right now. It looks like Lipscomb at one point was a 1.5-point favorite, and it's crossing the threshold to a pick'em over to potentially Eastern Kentucky being favored in the game. The one thing that really keeps me off of this is that KenPom has Lipscomb as a 4-point favorite in this one. So I don't know if there are injuries or what's going on, or if the line is just that far off. KenPom usually is not wrong, man. So I don't know. Like occasionally I'll find a situation, I'll go against him, but not by like 4 or 5 points like this. But Lipscomb, they are in a bad spot. So there's still no way I would want to play Lipscomb. And I would still lean against them. They just upset Florida State, man. That was a big upset of Florida State on the road, even though Florida State, yeah, they're down a bit, but Florida State, still, they're an ACC team, big name team. Lipscomb went into their house and beat them as like 8.5-point underdogs or something like that. That's a big win. Lipscomb has had some pretty competitive games against some decent teams here. They played competitive against Arkansas a few games before, 2 games before that. Now they have a second straight road game after that big upset over Florida State, but it is their conference opener, but it's at Eastern Kentucky, who suck. But they do have Bellarmine up next, and Bellarmine has not been playing well either. So I don't know. You're coming off a huge win. Will you be totally focused, even though it is a conference opener? It's on the road here, so it is a second straight road game, too, for Lipscomb. Will you be totally focused on Eastern Kentucky, who hasn't been playing very well? That's pretty questionable, I would say. Lipscomb, I think they're probably going to be in like a letdown spot here, even though it is the conference opener. The KenPom numbers are what kind of keep me off of this more so than anything else. So I'll just stay off of it a little bit. And then the other unfortunate thing we have here is Washington State and Oregon State are playing each other, and they're both coming off pretty big games. Oregon State just beat USC by 16 as I think like 8.5-point underdogs, and Washington State hung with Colorado right until the end, and that was a big game. I was on Washington State in that one, and they hung within the number the whole time, and the final score actually makes it look a bit worse than it actually was. They were within 3, like pretty late in that game. Washington State hung around in that one, played a good game. Excuse me, I was like 7.5-point underdogs there. Washington State's about an 11-point favorite here in this game against Oregon State. KenPom has the number about the same, but I was like looking at what Washington State did in that previous game. I was like, oh, I might want to go against them here after they played a tough game against Colorado. But Oregon State, yeah, they're also in a pretty tough spot there. So I can't do it, man. They're coming off a nice upset over USC. I'm not going to be able to do that there. And then Utah does have a look ahead to Arizona. They're playing the Arizona road leg here, going to Arizona State, but they're coming off a win over Washington where they didn't win by that much. After they blew out Washington State, Utah beat Washington and did not cover. So will that like cause them to refocus a little bit? I don't know, because they have Arizona in 2 days. So I think Utah has a look ahead spot here. So they're going to Arizona State. If they're going to be focused on one of these 2 games, it's going to be Arizona and not Arizona State. So I kind of lean against Utah here as well in the line looks a little bit suspect here. And Arizona State's coming off game where they did have to mount like a gigantic comeback against Cal. They were actually underdogs against Cal, and they came all the way back and won. So that was a furious comeback for Arizona State too. So I don't know if they're going to like run out of gas in this game or not. So I just have to stay away. But Utah's down from 6 to 5.5. I think Ken Pom probably has this game even less than that, I would guess, actually. I think they probably have – he's probably got it around 4, even though he has Utah ranked pretty well here, pretty high. Oh, no, I'm way off, actually. He has Utah at 7. Never mind. He has Utah ranked – well, he has Arizona State ranked a lot lower than I thought he did. He has, a 7-point game, so I'll just stay away from that one too. But Utah, I think they're not in the best spot here. All that leaves me to say, like, what game am I actually on here? I think you guys know what I'm on, man. I'll take a team one game and I'll just fade them the next game if the result comes through. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm fading Florida Gulf Coast. I was on them in their previous game against FAU. I liked the spot for them. They were coming off barely beating Florida Memorial, who's like a Division II team. That I think they were looking ahead to Florida Atlantic, and they were just totally focused on Florida Atlantic, kind of an in-state big brother of theirs there. And Florida Atlantic was not in a good spot, coming off beating Arizona in a huge win. Although I think it might have been before the holidays. I don't remember. And they had time off. I don't even really remember. And Florida State had their conference opener coming up, which they played last night and won, I believe, against East Carolina. Florida Atlantic, dropped that game against Florida Gulf Coast, man. That was a huge win for Florida Gulf Coast. I think it was their first win against a ranked team in I don't even know how long. Like, it was like their biggest upset win, I heard, like, in history, based on the numbers. You remember Florida Gulf Coast had that big upset win in the tournament over Georgetown. They wound up winning multiple games in that tournament. I think they were like 13.5-point underdogs in the game where they beat Georgetown. They won as 17-point underdogs at home against FAU. That was a huge upset for Florida Gulf Coast. Probably the biggest win they've ever had on their home floor. The crowd stormed the court, and the refs like made them wait and had to put like time back on the clock, even though the game was like already over at that point. It was a 4-point game. Like, come on, man. Florida Gulf Coast, yeah, it delayed the inevitable, but the crowd rushed the court. That was a massive, massive upset, massive win for Florida Gulf Coast over Florida Atlantic. And now they've just been sitting around at home since then, basking in that win. Basically the biggest win in program history. And now, even though you do have a team in the Atlantic Sun in your conference coming into your house to start conference play, and they do have one of the top records in the A-Sun, even though I don't even think they're that good a team. They've played a lot of bad teams this year. That is Jacksonville coming in. Will you be totally focused on Jacksonville when you just pulled off that monumental upset? I am banking on the fact that Florida Gulf Coast may not be. They're not a really good team, really. I think they're going to be in a hangover spot. The one thing I don't love about this is that Florida Gulf Coast is favored over a team that has a better record than they do, because Jacksonville actually is not good. Florida Gulf Coast is actually better than Jacksonville. Florida Gulf Coast has played a tougher schedule. They've played Indiana, who I don't think is very good this year, though. They've played Pitt. They've played Cincinnati. Wilmington, who's not bad. UNC Wilmington. Missouri State's not bad either. They played Minnesota, and of course, they just played Florida Atlantic. They've played a tougher schedule, like, by far. Jacksonville has a lot of cupcake wins, but I just think this is a terrible spot for Florida Gulf Coast. Jacksonville, on the other hand, I think they're going to be focused here. In their last game, they played a Division II team, so that might help, like, break their momentum. After they got blown out by Purdue, they got to play like a tune-up game basically against the Division II team in Erskine. So that probably just helps Jacksonville like have like a little bit of a tune-up there. Ken Pom has this game at around 5, I believe, between Jacksonville and Florida Gulf Coast. This is a major letdown for Florida Gulf Coast, man. Even though it is their home opener, I don't like to go against teams in spots where they're the home opener that much, and I don't like to play underdogs that have the better record. But I don't think anybody really thinks that Florida Gulf Coast is actually not the better team here. I don't think anybody thinks Jacksonville is actually the better team here, despite their record. I think it's a bad spot here. Yeah, the number's at 5. I'm taking Florida Gulf Coast, I'm fading Florida Gulf Coast. I'm taking Jacksonville plus 5.5 here. Florida Gulf Coast in the huge letdown spot, despite it being the home conference home opener for them. That is such a monumental win. I don't know if you can really like maintain that And you might be like convincing yourself that Jacksonville is not as good as they look because they have a lot of wins that don't look very good. And it is true they're not as good as their record looks. But this is a horrible spot for Florida Gulf Coast, letdown spot. So I was on them in that huge upset win. It was awesome. It was nice. We're going to turn it around and we're going to go the opposite way in this one. They're now in the letdown spot. We'll take Jacksonville plus 5.5. Jacksonville off that easy like tune-up win. Going to hockey real quick here. Don't have that much to say in this hockey slate, really, though. There was one other team that I know. Philadelphia is returning home from a road trip, but I just don't want to get involved in that because they're like kind of a bigger favorite. And Columbus is coming off a game against the Bruins, which is kind of a tough, like physical type of game. Columbus makes those games a bit muddy, physical, even though the Bruins did win 4-1, but Philadelphia is down from 205 to 197 on the money line. 75% of the tickets, 99% of the cash. I doubt that that's accurate, but Philadelphia is returning home from a road trip, but I just can't do it there. Even though the return from a road trip angle is a negative. Seattle, I think, might be in a letdown spot off of the big Winter Classic win where they shut out Vegas. So I think they're in a letdown spot, down from minus 135 to minus 125 on the money line. 60% of the tickets, 61% of the cash on them. So it looks like they have the slight cash discrepancy right now, but I don't buy that because the number is going down on them towards Ottawa. I do think it's a letdown spot for Seattle, but I can't quite get there with that one. But I do lean to Ottawa in that one. And then Florida Vegas is a very interesting game with Vegas dealing with some injuries now, man. Florida is actually the favorite on the road, but Vegas is coming off that bad performance in the Winter Classic. And I think they're looking at revenge now because Florida got Stanley Cup final revenge on them in the previous matchup they had not that long ago. So I would kind of lean Vegas in this one. Florida's down from minus 117 to minus 110 as a road favorite here with the tickets evenly split 50-50. If Florida looks like they have 88% of the cash right now. Not sure I totally buy that aspect of it, but I do think that it's a better spot for Vegas and that one to bounce back from a bad loss and to atone for losing to Florida not that long ago either. What are the games I'm actually on in hockey? Two of them. Well, one of the games I'm on, you actually have to lay a price here as a road favorite, but I'm fading the Montreal Canadiens. And I think the price kind of looks a little bit hard to do because you're laying a road favorite with a team that has the worst record in the Buffalo Sabres here. So that looks a little bit sketchy to do, but this is a terrible spot for Montreal. They've been on the road since Christmas, basically. They had some road games before Christmas too, but now since Christmas, they've had a 4-game road trip. They lost the first 3. They were all against good teams. Carolina, Florida, Tampa. Played Tampa pretty close. Actually played Carolina pretty close. And then they finished the road trip by beating Dallas. Huge win. Now they're returning home with only 1 day off. I think you're going to get those distractions of returning home coming into play here. You just beat Dallas, so you're in a letdown spot. You have a Buffalo team with not a very good record coming into your house, and you just beat Buffalo on the road as well in their house on December 9th. So Montreal did beat them too, so there might be a little bit of a road reversal revenge angle here if Buffalo remembers that, because that game wasn't that long ago. And Montreal also has the New York Rangers up next, which makes this a return home spot and a sandwich spot, coming off a huge win over Dallas and with a big game against the Rangers up next. And you just beat Buffalo on their own ice earlier, last month now, because it is January now. I don't like that at all. I like Buffalo in the spot, even though you have to lay minus 130 or somewhere in that range. I think that's what I laid. Buffalo, they're up from minus 127 to minus 129, according to this, and I don't see the percentages yet. They're actually sitting at 130, I think was the best I could find. Buffalo has had extra days off. They haven't played since the 31st, so they have the better rest spot as well. Some of that is factoring into the line a little bit, but I just think the spot is so bad for Montreal with only 1 day off, returning home in a sandwich spot, letdown spot as well. Buffalo has had 3 days off, and in their last game, they got stomped 5-1 by Ottawa. So I think they're going to show up focused here. They have 3 days off. They don't have that much looming on the horizon here. They're going to Montreal, multiple days off to try to change some things after a horrible loss to Ottawa, 5-1. I like this a lot. The line looks kind of suspect as well, with a Buffalo team with the worst record laying a price on the road. I think the odds makers know that Buffalo is actually the slightly better team over Montreal, though the line is factoring in how bad the spot is for Montreal too, but I'm not sure it's factoring it in enough, to be honest. It's still a price where you're almost just playing like who's going to win the game pretty much. Buffalo minus 130. And then the other game I'm on is going to be on the Arizona Coyotes. I think this is a sandwich spot for the Islanders. So we're down from minus 123 to minus 113. I'm finally fading the Islanders for once. Hopefully that doesn't come back to bite me. I haven't been good on these Islanders games. Oh, God. They're down from minus 123 to minus 113 on the money line. 67% of the tickets on the Islanders, but 84% of the cash on the Islanders. I'm not sure about that. The cash discrepancy might turn around a little bit, but I think the public is going to be on the Islanders because they are the team that has the better record here, or at least the better looking record, but that's because they have a lot of overtime losses. So they play a lot of close games. Speaking of which, what are they off of? Oh, they're off an overtime loss. 2 days ago, they went to Colorado after they lost in Pittsburgh again, losing to Pittsburgh twice in the prior 3 games. They went to Colorado, had a battle, and lost in overtime, man. And they're winning that game by 2 goals in the second period of that game. They're winning throughout that game. I think they actually never trailed in the game until the final score. So that's a brutal loss. I don't think they trailed in regulation at all. Wound up losing to Colorado in overtime. That was 2 days ago. And who do they have up on Saturday, 2 days from now? They have Vegas. So I think this is a sandwich spot. They're coming off that really tough performance, tough way to lose. I don't know if you can get right back up off the mat after that Colorado game, coming kind of out of elevation now to play Arizona. And you got Vegas up next and Vancouver after that. This is going to be kind of the down spot in the schedule here, a sandwich spot between those bigger teams, man. So I don't know if they're going to be totally focused on the Arizona Coyotes here. And the Coyotes, at least they're off a tough game, but at least they're in a bounce back spot because they lost really badly to Florida 4-1. So even though that's a big matchup, it's a big game. I think you might refocus when you lose by 3 goals like that to Florida. I think Arizona might be in the better spot here. And it looks like Ingram might be back in net for them this time instead of Vejmelka. I know I talked about like a while back, Ingram, they're winning all their games with Ingram and losing all the games with Vejmelka. That's no longer the case, but Vejmelka did play in their previous game where they lost to Florida. So I think Ingram, I would expect probably is going to be in net in this one. I'm not totally sure, but I think it's a bounce back spot for them. They do have Winnipeg and then Boston up next. So when you just lost 4-1, man, I think you're probably going to show up focused. Excuse me. You're staying at home here. You got a team with a record that actually looks pretty good coming in, at least in the New York Islanders, even though they have a lot of overtime losses. I think it's a sandwich spot for the Islanders, so I'm on it. Arizona plus 100. You can get it at even money like that. So that's going to do it for me, man. My 3 plays on the day: college basketball, Jacksonville plus 5.5, and in NHL, Buffalo minus 130, and Arizona plus 100 on the money line. Let's right the ship, man. Let's get this done because I think both of those plays should have won last night, especially the Kings. I'm livid. I'm pissed. I don't think I mishandicapped really. Let's get it done. Let's get these games. Have a good day, man. Happy Thursday. No NFL games this Thursday, by the way, either. No NFL games tonight for once. We're done with the Thursday night games, which are awful anyway. I'm not missing it. We got games coming up on Saturday. I'll have an NFL video out probably tonight. I'll have to do it for the final week of regulation, or week of the regular season for the NFL. I'll probably get that out tonight. Peace out.